She was just a cargo pilot flying quiet routes over dark ocean water. Nobody remembered her old call sign. Then one night, a Mayday call echoed through the radio. A fighter jet was falling from the sky. And when she answered back, two F-22 pilots froze. They had just heard her call sign. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The sky over the North Atlantic was black and cold. Captain Mara Ellis sat in the cockpit of a large gray C-17 cargo plane, flying at 31,000 feet. Below her, there was nothing but dark ocean water, moving slowly like a sleeping giant. The cockpit was quiet. Only the soft hum of the engines and the faint smell of old coffee filled the air. Mara had been flying this same route for almost 2 years. Every week, she carried heavy boxes across the ocean. Sometimes it was medical equipment. Sometimes it was spare parts for other planes. Sometimes it was just paper files that nobody wanted to send any other way. It was safe work. It was quiet work. Nobody ever noticed a cargo pilot, and that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Beside her sat First Officer Tom Bishop, a young pilot who had only been flying for 2 years. He liked to talk. He liked to ask questions. Tonight, he was checking the weather radar for the 5th time. "Clear skies ahead, Captain," Tom said. "Should be a smooth flight the rest of the way." "Good," Mara said. Her voice was calm, but tired. She looked at the clock. 4 more hours until they landed. 4 more hours of silence and dark water below. Mara had not always flown cargo planes. 3 years earlier, she had been a fighter pilot. She flew an F-16 for the Air Force. She had seen real danger in the sky, moments where one small mistake could end everything. But one night, during a mission, everything in her life changed. She had been given an order to fire on a target. But something felt wrong. On her screen, the shapes below did not look like enemy soldiers. They looked smaller. She believed they were civilians, maybe even children. So she broke away from the mission. She did not fire. Later, reports proved she was right. The target was a group of villagers, not enemy fighters. Her choice had saved many innocent lives. But the people above her did not care that she was right. They only cared that she had disobeyed a direct order. A pilot who questioned commands, even for a good reason, was seen as a risk. 2 weeks later, she received a letter. It said she was being moved from the fighter squadron to cargo transport, effective immediately. No public reason was given. No trial. No medal. Just a quiet transfer that ended one part of her life forever. Mara never talked about this with anyone in her new unit. To them, she was just Captain Ellis, a serious woman who flew her routes and rarely smiled. They did not know about the metal box hidden in the back of her closet, filled with old photos and a torn flight patch she could never bring herself to throw away. She told herself that flying was flying, no matter what kind of plane she was in. But on quiet nights like this one, she still felt something in her hands. A memory of fast controls and sharp turns. The cargo plane she flew now was slow and heavy, more like driving a large truck through thick mud than flying a bird through open sky. "Captain," Tom said suddenly, sitting up straight. "Did you hear that?" Mara frowned. "Hear what?" Then it came again. A burst of static on the emergency radio channel, the frequency every pilot in the sky could hear if something went wrong. A voice broke through, shaking with fear. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Viper 2-2. Engine failure. I repeat, engine failure. I am losing altitude. Requesting immediate assistance." Mara's whole body went still. The voice belonged to a military pilot, somewhere in the dark sky below them, in serious trouble. "Captain, that's a fighter jet," Tom said, his voice rising with worry. "There's no fighter mission logged near this route tonight." Mara's mind moved fast. A fighter jet losing power over the ocean at night, with no rescue ship nearby, was in terrible danger. If the pilot had to eject or crash into the freezing water without help close by, the chances of survival were very low. The nearest rescue base was hours away. "Get me his coordinates," Mara said. Her voice had changed. It was sharp now, awake, cutting through her tiredness like a knife. Tom's fingers moved quickly over the navigation screen. "Bearing 280, distance 55 miles. He's falling fast, Captain. Altitude 4,000 feet and dropping." 55 miles was nothing for a fighter jet. But for a heavy cargo plane, it was a long, slow journey. Still, Mara was the closest aircraft in the sky. There was no one else. "Viper 2-2, this is Heavy 6-1, Tom said into the radio, his voice shaking slightly. "We hear your Mayday call. We are turning toward your position." There was a pause. Then the pilot's voice returned, weaker this time. "Copy, Heavy 6-1. I don't think I can hold altitude much longer. Losing cabin power. I might lose radio contact soon." Mara's hands tightened on the controls. She thought about her flight plan, the strict rules that told her exactly where to fly and when. Leaving the plan without permission could end her career completely this time. There would be no second warning, no second chance. But somewhere below her, in the dark, a pilot was falling out of the sky. And she was the only one close enough to help. "We're turning," Mara said firmly, already pulling the controls to the side. "Captain, we can't do anything for him," Tom said. "We're a transport plane. We have no weapons, no rescue gear. We can't even land on water." "We can be his eyes," Mara said. "And right now, that might be enough." She pushed the throttles forward. The big engines groaned under the sudden demand for power. The heavy plane shook as it turned hard, cutting through the black sky toward the falling jet. "Viper 2-2, this is Heavy 6-1, Mara said into the radio herself now, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "Talk to me. What's your status?" "Losing hydraulics," the pilot answered, breathing hard. "Might have to ditch in the water. I don't have a visual on the surface. It's too dark. I can't tell where the waves are." Mara knew exactly what that meant. Landing a jet on ocean water without seeing the surface first was one of the most dangerous things a pilot could try. Hit the water at the wrong angle, and the jet would break apart on impact. "Listen to me," Mara said. "I'm going to bring my aircraft down close and use my landing lights to show you the water. Follow my light path and match my angle as you come down." "Captain, that's too risky," Tom said. "This plane is too heavy for that kind of move." "Then help me fly it," Mara said. She pushed the nose of the giant cargo plane down, dropping altitude fast. The frame of the plane rattled and groaned in protest. Loose straps in the cargo area behind them shook against the metal floor as gravity pulled everything forward. "Gear down," Mara ordered. "At this speed, the doors could rip off," Tom said. "Do it anyway." Tom's hand pushed the lever down. The landing gear extended into the wind with a hard shudder, acting like a brake against their falling speed. The plane shook violently, but Mara held it steady, her arms burning from the effort of forcing the heavy controls. The altimeter spun downward. 3,000 feet. 2,000 feet. The cargo plane was never built to fly this close to danger, this close to the black ocean below. "Viper 2-2, do you see my lights?" Mara called out. For a moment, there was only static. Then the pilot's voice returned, full of relief. "I see you. I see your lights." Mara reached up and switched on every landing light the aircraft had. Bright white beams cut through the darkness, spreading across the surface of the ocean below. For the first time, the black water became visible, rough and moving, covered in small waves. "Match my angle," Mara said. follow the light path down. The fighter jet appeared out of the darkness behind them, gliding silently with its engine dead, a thin line of smoke trailing behind it. It followed the beam of light exactly as Mara guided, slowly lowering toward the surface. "Steady," Mara said, watching closely. "Steady now." The jet's nose lifted at the last second, the pilot pulling back hard to slow the fall before hitting the waves. The aircraft slammed into the water with a huge splash, skipping once across the surface before coming to a stop, floating but in one piece. "He's down," Tom shouted. "He made it." Mara turned the cargo plane hard, circling back toward the crash site. Her hands were shaking now, the tension of the last few minutes finally catching up with her. "Drop the emergency raft," she ordered. Tom rushed to the back of the plane and released the survival raft through the side door. It fell into the dark water near the floating wreckage, ready for the pilot to use. As Mara circled above, watching the pilot climb slowly onto the raft, a new voice broke through the radio. This one was different, sharp and alert. "Unknown cargo aircraft, you are flying in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Mara's radar screen suddenly showed two fast shapes approaching from the west, moving much quicker than any normal aircraft. Fighter jets. Judging by how late they appeared on radar, they were stealth fighters. F-22s. "This is Heavy 6-1, Mara answered carefully. "We responded to a Mayday call. Pilot has been recovered and is in the water on a life raft." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, quieter now, confused. "Say your call sign again." Mara hesitated. She had not used her old call sign in 3 years. It belonged to a different life, a life she thought was gone for good. But something told her this was not the moment to hide who she really was. "Call sign Falcon," she said quietly into the radio. "It's been a while." The silence on the radio stretched for several seconds. Then the sharp voice returned, softer now, almost stunned. "Falcon. Is that really you?" Mara closed her eyes for a moment. Old memories rushed back all at once. "Yes," she said. "It's me." The two F-22s dropped down beside her cargo plane, flying in close formation, like escorts. One of the pilots came on the radio again, his voice full of disbelief. "We heard Falcon on an open frequency and honestly thought someone was joking. Nobody uses that call sign anymore. Command pulled you off active duty years ago." "I fly cargo now," Mara said simply. "But I still know how to fly." "That was some flying tonight," the F-22 pilot said. "You saved that man's life. Rescue boats are 30 minutes out. We'll circle here and guide them in." "Copy that," Mara answered. "Thank you." Tom returned to his seat, breathing heavily, his face pale from the rush of adrenaline. He looked at Mara as if seeing her for the first time. "You used to be a fighter pilot," he said slowly. "That's why you knew exactly what to do." Mara nodded, saying nothing at first. She looked out at the dark ocean below, at the small red flare the rescued pilot had lit to mark his position, glowing steady against the black water. She said finally. "Now I'm just a cargo pilot." "That wasn't just flying a cargo plane back there," Tom said. "That was something else." Mara allowed herself a small, tired smile. She reached up and flipped the autopilot back on, letting the aircraft settle into a steady climb back toward calm skies. Her hands finally stopped shaking. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Some things don't go away. They just wait." The two F-22s stayed close beside her for the rest of the flight, a quiet reminder that somewhere far above the clouds, her old life had never really left her behind. By the time the base runway appeared on the horizon, the sky had begun to turn pale gray. The first hint of morning light pushed back against the darkness. Mara guided the heavy cargo plane down through the clouds, her landing smooth and controlled, as if the last few hours had never happened. Ground crew were already waiting on the tarmac, along with 2 officers she did not recognize, standing beside a dark car with its engine running. Tom looked nervous as the plane rolled to a stop. "Are we in trouble?" he asked quietly, unbuckling his harness. "Maybe," Mara said. "Or maybe not. Either way, we did the right thing." She stepped down from the aircraft into the cold morning air, her legs stiff after hours in the cockpit. One of the waiting officers walked toward her, his face unreadable. For a moment, Mara braced herself for the same tired questions from the past. But instead, the officer simply held out his hand. "Captain Ellis," he said. "Command received word of what happened out there tonight. The pilot you saved, Lieutenant Grant, is being flown to the base hospital right now. He asked us to thank you personally." Mara shook his hand, still unsure what to say. "I just did what any pilot would do." "No," the officer said, shaking his head. "Not every pilot would have broken from their flight plan to fly that close to the water in a transport aircraft. Not every pilot could have. That took skill most fighter pilots don't even have anymore." Mara said nothing, letting the words settle over her. For 3 years, she had been told she was a risk, someone who could not be trusted. Standing on that cold runway, hearing something different for the first time, felt strange, almost unfamiliar, like stepping into shoes she had forgotten how to wear. Later that day, after the reports were filed and the questions were finally over, Mara sat alone in the small crew lounge, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She thought about Tom's shaking hands on the controls during the dive, about the bright beam of her landing lights cutting through the darkest night she had ever flown through. She thought, too, about the call sign she had not spoken aloud in 3 years. Falcon. It had felt strange leaving her mouth again, like an old song she had almost forgotten the words to. But it had come back easily, the moment it mattered most. Maybe the review board had been wrong about one thing. She was not a risk. She never had been. She was simply a pilot who had been waiting quietly, patiently, for the sky to need her again. And when it finally had, she had answered. A week later, there was a knock on the door of the crew lounge. Mara looked up from her paperwork to see a young man standing there, his arm in a sling, a small bandage above his eyebrow. It took her a second to place him. Lieutenant Grant, the pilot from the raft. "Captain Ellis," he said. "I hope it's okay that I came by. I wanted to thank you in person." Mara stood up, unsure what to say. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," Grant said. "I was falling out of the sky with no lights, no visual, nothing. And then out of nowhere, this massive cargo plane shows up and turns into my personal runway." He smiled. "The guys on my base still don't believe a transport pilot pulled that off." "I just used what I had," Mara said quietly. "No," Grant said. "You used who you are. Somebody told me your old call sign was Falcon. That true?" Mara looked at him for a long moment, then allowed herself a small smile. "It was," she said. "Maybe it still is." Grant nodded, like that answer made perfect sense to him. He shook her hand once more, thanked her again, and left her alone with her coffee and her thoughts. Maybe the review board had been wrong about one thing. She was not a risk. She never had been. She was simply a pilot who had been waiting quietly, patiently, for the sky to need her again. And when it finally had, she had answered.